Marcus Thompson stood at the edge of the dusty driveway, his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, clutching his weathered hand as they stared at what would become their new home. The abandoned farmhouse looked like something from a forgotten dream, its white paint peeling away in long strips, revealing the gray wood underneath. Tall weeds had claimed the front yard, and a rusty mailbox hung at an odd angle, barely clinging to its post. "Daddy, it looks scary," Emma whispered, pressing closer to his side. Her small voice carried the uncertainty that had followed them for months since her mother's passing. Marcus knelt down to meet her eyes, brushing a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. "I know, sweetheart, but remember what we talked about? Sometimes the best treasures are hidden in places that don't look special at first." He gestured toward the property that stretched beyond the house. "Look at all that space. You could have the biggest garden in the whole county." The realtor, Mrs. Henderson, approached them with a clipboard and an apologetic smile. "I have to be honest with you, Mr. Thompson. This place has been empty for nearly 15 years. The previous owners, the Clearwater family, just up and left one day. No one knows exactly why." She paused, studying his face. "Are you sure about this? There are other properties available that might be more suitable for a man with a young daughter." Marcus had heard the whispered stories in town. People claimed the land was cursed, that strange things happened there at night. But he had also seen the price, and it was the only property he could afford on his mechanic salary. After Sarah's medical bills and funeral expenses, his savings had disappeared like morning dew. "We'll take it," he said firmly, signing the papers with determination. "Emma and I aren't afraid of a little hard work, are we, Princess?" Emma nodded, though her grip on his hand tightened. She had learned to trust her father's decisions, even when they seemed scary. Since her mother died, he had been her whole world, working extra hours at the garage during the day and reading her bedtime stories at night, trying to fill the emptiness that had settled over their small apartment in town. The first night in the farmhouse was challenging. The electricity worked, but the plumbing groaned and complained with every use. Marcus had set up air mattresses in what used to be the living room, since most of the upstairs rooms had leaky roofs. They ate peanut butter sandwiches by candlelight, listening to the old house settle around them with creaks and sighs. "Tell me about the garden again," Emma said as they lay in their makeshift bedroom, staring up at the water-stained ceiling. Marcus smiled in the darkness. "Well, we'll plant tomatoes first, because those are your favorites. Then maybe some corn, and definitely sunflowers because they grow tall like you're going to. And we'll have pumpkins for Halloween, and maybe even some strawberries if we're lucky. Will Mommy be able to see our garden from heaven?" Emma asked quietly. The question hit Marcus like a punch to the chest, as it always did. "I think she'll see everything we do, sweetheart. And I think she'll be proud of how brave you are." The next morning brought their first real look at the property in daylight. The house sat on 40 acres of overgrown pasture and woodland. Behind the main house stood a red barn that leaned slightly to one side, and scattered around the property were the remnants of old farm equipment, rusted and reclaimed by nature. Marcus walked the perimeter while Emma explored the yard, her initial fear giving way to curiosity. The land was beautiful, he had to admit. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, and a small creek ran along the eastern border of the property. It was exactly the kind of place he had dreamed of raising his daughter, far from the noise and dangers of the city. As he examined the barn, checking its structural integrity, Emma called out from near the house. "Daddy, come look at this." She had discovered an old well, its stone walls covered in moss and wild ivy. A wooden cover had been placed over the opening, but years of weather had warped the wood, leaving gaps large enough to peer through. "It's really deep," Emma said, leaning over to look down into the darkness. "I can't see the bottom." Marcus gently pulled her back from the edge. "We'll need to make sure this is properly covered before you play out here alone." He made a mental note to add it to his growing list of repairs and safety measures. They spent the next few days settling into a routine. Marcus would work on the house during Emma's school hours, fixing broken windows and patching holes in the roof. When she came home on the school bus, they would work together in the yard, clearing weeds and planning where to put their garden. The neighbors were few and far between, which suited Marcus just fine. The closest house was nearly 2 miles away, belonging to an elderly couple named the Johnsons who had brought over a casserole and welcomed them to the area with genuine warmth. "You picked a beautiful piece of land," Mr. Johnson had said, though Marcus noticed the way his wife's eyes had flickered with something that might have been concern. The Clearwaters were good people. Shame what happened to them. What had happened to them? Marcus had asked, but Mrs. Johnson had quickly changed the subject, asking about Emma's schooling and whether they needed anything from town. That evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma spotted something that made her sit up straight. "Daddy, look," she whispered, pointing toward the tree line at the edge of their property. Marcus followed her gaze and saw them too. Two figures standing motionless among the trees, barely visible in the fading light. They appeared to be women, though at this distance it was hard to make out any details. They stood perfectly still, as if they were watching the house. "Should we wave at them?" Emma asked innocently. Marcus felt an odd chill run down his spine. Something about the way the figures stood, so still and silent, struck him as unusual. "I don't think they're close enough to see us wave, Princess. Come on, let's go inside and get you ready for bed." As they gathered their things and headed for the door, Marcus glanced back toward the trees. The figures were gone, vanished as silently as they had appeared. He told himself it was probably just hikers or neighbors cutting through the woods, but sleep came slowly that night as he found himself listening to every sound the old house made in the darkness. The following week brought a routine that Marcus found comforting. Emma had adjusted well to the longer bus ride to school, and she seemed to enjoy having space to run and explore after years of living in their cramped apartment. Marcus threw himself into the restoration work, finding satisfaction in bringing the old farmhouse back to life with his own hands. He had managed to fix most of the plumbing issues and had started on the kitchen, stripping away layers of old wallpaper to reveal the original wooden walls underneath. The house was beginning to feel like home, filled with Emma's laughter and the sound of Marcus's tools as he worked. But the mysterious figures in the tree line continued to appear. At first, Marcus convinced himself he was imagining things. The stress of the move, the responsibility of raising Emma alone, the financial pressure of the house repairs. It was enough to make anyone's mind play tricks. But then Emma mentioned seeing them too. "The ladies in the trees are back," she said casually one afternoon as she colored at the kitchen table. "They were there when I got off the bus." Marcus looked up from the cabinet he was refinishing. "What ladies, sweetheart?" "The ones who watch our house. They're always by the big oak tree." Emma continued coloring, apparently unbothered by the presence of strangers on their property. "I think they're shy. Maybe they want to be friends, but don't know how to say hello." That evening, Marcus decided to investigate. After tucking Emma into bed, he walked to the edge of the property where she had pointed earlier. The oak tree stood ancient and massive, its branches spreading wide enough to shade a significant area. In the soft earth around its base, he found footprints. The prints were clearly from bare feet, smaller than his own, but definitely adult-sized. They formed a pattern around the tree, as if someone had been walking in slow circles. What puzzled him most was how clear and fresh they looked, despite the rain they'd had 2 days earlier. Marcus followed the trail as far as he could in the moonlight. The footprints led deeper into the woods, following what appeared to be an old path that had been overgrown for years. Eventually, the trail became too difficult to follow in the darkness, and he turned back, making a mental note to explore further during the day. The next morning brought unexpected visitors of a different sort. Marcus was replacing rotted boards on the front porch when a pickup truck pulled into their driveway. 2 men climbed out, both wearing jeans and flannel shirts, both looking uncomfortable as they approached the house. "You the fellow who bought this place?" the older of the two asked. He was tall and weathered, with gray streaking his brown hair. "Name's Bill Crawford. This here's my son, Jake." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and walked over to greet them. "Marcus Thompson. Nice to meet you both. We live about 5 miles east of here, Bill continued, glancing nervously at the house. Wanted to come by and, well, to give you some advice if you don't mind. Jake, who looked to be in his 20s, shifted uncomfortably and shot his father a look that suggested this visit hadn't been his idea. What kind of advice? Marcus asked, curious about the serious tone in Bill's voice. This land. Bill paused, choosing his words carefully. It's out of history. The Clearwater family, they were good folks. Lived here for 3 generations. But something drove them away, and they left in quite a hurry. What kind of something? Marcus found himself asking, despite his better judgment. Strange happenings. Things that couldn't be easily explained. Bill looked around the property as if expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. Sounds at night. People where people shouldn't be. The family tried to stick it out, but eventually they just couldn't take it anymore. Jake finally spoke up. Dad, you're going to scare the man and his little girl away with your old stories. They're not stories, son. I saw some of it myself when I helped Tom Clearwater with his harvest that last year. Bill turned back to Marcus. Look, I'm not trying to run you off. Lord knows this community needs good families. But if you start noticing strange things, don't try to handle it alone. There are people in town who understand the history of this area. What kind of people? Marcus asked. Talk to old Pete at the hardware store. He knows more about the early days around here than anyone. Bill climbed back into his truck, but rolled down the window before leaving. Just keep your eyes open, Mr. Thompson, and keep that little girl of yours close. As the truck disappeared down the road, Marcus stood in his driveway, feeling more puzzled than worried. Every rural community seemed to have its share of local legends and ghost stories. He had grown up in a small town himself and remembered how eager people were to share tales of haunted houses and mysterious happenings with newcomers. That afternoon, while Emma was at school, Marcus decided to take Bill's advice and visit Pete's hardware store in town. The store was a throwback to an earlier era, with wooden floors that creaked underfoot and shelves packed with everything from nails to fishing tackle. Old Pete turned out to be a man in his 70s with kind eyes and hands stained from years of working with tools and machinery. He greeted Marcus warmly and seemed genuinely pleased to meet their newest resident. Heard you bought the old Clearwater place, Pete said as he rang up Marcus's purchase of new hinges and weatherproofing supplies. Beautiful land out there. Some of the best soil in the county. Bill Crawford stopped by this morning. Marcus said carefully. He mentioned you might know some of the history of the area. Pete's expression grew thoughtful. He glanced around the store, confirming they were alone, then leaned across the counter. What did Bill tell you? Just that strange things happen out there. Said the Clearwater family left because of it. Pete nodded slowly. The Clearwaters were the 3rd family to abandon that land in the past 60 years. Before them, it was the Mackenzies, and before that, the original homesteaders, the Williams family. All for the same reason. Similar reasons, anyway. Unexplained visitors, sounds that didn't make sense, feelings of being watched. Pete paused, studying Marcus's face. But there's more to it than just ghost stories, if you're willing to listen. Marcus nodded, finding himself genuinely curious despite his natural skepticism. That land sits on what used to be a winter camp for the local Apache tribes. They would come through every year on their seasonal migrations, stay for a few weeks, then move on. This went on for generations, long before any white settlers arrived. And, well, when the first homesteaders arrived, they didn't understand the significance of the area. They built their houses and fences right over places that had spiritual meaning to the Apache people. There was conflict, naturally. Some violence, some tragedy. Pete lowered his voice. Local history says there were Apache women who died on that land, defending their sacred places. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. You're talking about the 2 women Emma and I have been seeing. Pete's eyebrows rose. You've seen them? Twice now. Always at the edge of the woods, always watching a house. Emma thinks they're just shy neighbors. Maybe your daughter's closer to the truth than you realize, Pete said quietly. From what I've heard over the years, they've never been hostile. They just watch, like they're waiting for something. Waiting for what? I honestly don't know. But I can tell you this. Every family that's tried to live on that land has eventually left because they couldn't handle the constant feeling of being observed. The Clearwaters lasted the longest, nearly 12 years. But even they finally gave up. Marcus left the hardware store with more questions than answers, but also with a strange sense of relief. At least now he knew he and Emma weren't imagining things. As he drove back toward their new home, he found himself looking at the land differently. Instead of seeing just beautiful countryside, he began to notice the subtle signs of the area's deeper history. The way certain trees grew in perfect circles, the odd rock formations that might once have been ceremonial sites, the paths through the woods that seemed too deliberate to be merely animal trails. That evening, as he and Emma worked together planting bulbs for next spring's garden, she looked up from her digging and smiled. "I saw them again today, Daddy. The ladies. They were closer this time." "How close?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Close enough that I could see they were wearing pretty clothes, and their hair was really long and black." Emma continued her careful planting. "I waved at them, and I think one of them waved back." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "Emma, from now on, if you see those ladies, I want you to come find me right away, okay? Don't try to talk to them or go near them by yourself." "But why?" "They seem nice. I'm sure they are, sweetheart. But we don't know them yet, and it's always better to be safe." He helped her pat down the soil around a tulip bulb. "Promise me?" "I promise, Daddy." That night, Marcus found himself standing at his bedroom window, looking out of the tree line. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows across the yard, and, for a moment, he thought he saw movement near the oak tree. But when he looked more closely, there was nothing there except the gentle swaying of branches in the evening breeze. As he finally settled into bed, Marcus realized that despite the mystery surrounding their new home, he felt more at peace than he had since Sarah's death. There was something about this land, something that called to him in a way he couldn't quite explain. Whatever secrets it held, whatever history lay buried beneath its soil, he was determined to face it head-on. For Emma's sake and for his own. 3 weeks after their conversation with old Pete, the first real contact occurred on a crisp October morning while Marcus was repairing the barn roof. Emma was supposed to be in school, but the county had declared a teacher work day, so she spent the morning helping him organize tools and watching for falling leaves to add to the pile she was collecting for jumping. Marcus was focused on replacing damaged shingles when Emma's voice cut through the autumn air with unusual urgency. "Daddy, they're here, and they're not hiding this time." He scrambled down the ladder so quickly he nearly lost his footing, his heart pounding as he scanned the yard for his daughter. Emma stood near the garden plot they had been preparing, perfectly still, staring toward the house. Following her gaze, Marcus saw them clearly for the first time. 2 Native American women stood at the edge of their front yard, no longer concealed by trees or distance. They appeared to be middle-aged, dressed in traditional clothing that seemed both ancient and timeless. The taller of the two wore a dress of deep brown buckskin decorated with intricate beadwork, while the other was clothed in similar garments of darker hues. Their long black hair was braided with what appeared to be strips of leather and small ornaments that caught the sunlight. What struck Marcus most profoundly was their absolute stillness. They stood like statues, their dark eyes fixed on the farmhouse with an intensity that made his skin prickle with awareness. There was nothing threatening about their presence, but there was also nothing entirely natural about it either. "Should I wave again?" Emma whispered, moving closer to her father's side. "Let's just wait and see what they want," Marcus replied quietly, his mind racing through possible explanations and responses. Part of him wondered if he should call the sheriff, but something deeper told him these women weren't trespassing in any conventional sense. For several long minutes, the 4 of them remained frozen in tableau. Marcus and Emma near the barn, the 2 women by the house. The only movement came from the gentle breeze stirring the fallen leaves and the occasional cloud passing overhead. Marcus found himself studying their faces, noting the strong cheekbones and the way they held themselves with quiet dignity. Then, without warning, the taller woman began to walk toward them. Marcus instinctively stepped in front of Emma, though not in a way that suggested fear. More like a father naturally protecting his child while remaining open to communication. The woman approached with measured steps, her feet making no sound on the grass. When she was about 20 feet away, she stopped and spoke. "You are the new keeper of this land." Her voice carried a slight accent and held the cadence of someone who had learned English as a second language, though her words were clear and precise. "You have brought the child here." "This is my property," Marcus replied carefully, trying to keep his voice steady and respectful. "My daughter Emma, and I live here now. Can I help you with something?" The woman's gaze shifted to Emma, and her stern expression softened slightly. "The child has kind eyes. She waves when others would hide." She paused, seeming to consider her words. "I'm Maria Santos. This is my sister, Elena. We have been watching your land for many seasons." "Watching it for what?" Marcus asked. "For someone who would understand. Someone who would listen." Maria glanced back toward her sister, who had remained by the house. "The families before you, they feared what they did not understand. They tried to make us leave, try to forget what this place holds." Emma, with the fearless curiosity of childhood, stepped out from behind her father. "Are you ghosts?" she asked matter-of-factly. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Maria smiled, the first human expression he had seen from either woman. "We are not ghosts, little one. We are very much alive. But we are connected to this land in ways that are difficult for others to understand. My name is Emma Thompson, and this is my daddy, Marcus. We moved here because we needed a fresh start after my mommy went to heaven." Emma's directness seemed to catch Maria off guard, and the woman's expression grew even gentler. "I'm sorry for the loss of your mother," Maria said solemnly. "It is not easy to grow up without the guidance of the women who came before us." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "Thank you. That's very kind." Maria studied them both for a long moment before speaking again. "This land holds the spirits of our ancestors. My great-grandmother and her sister died here during a winter when white settlers tried to drive our people away. They were protecting the sacred places, the burial grounds that your houses and barns now cover." The weight of her words settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. "I had no idea." The realtor never mentioned. "White men's papers do not recognize what has been sacred for generations," Maria said without bitterness, simply stating a fact. "But the land remembers, and we remember. What do you want from us?" Marcus asked, though his tone held genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness. "We want what we have wanted from every family that has lived here. Acknowledgement, respect, understanding that you are not just owners of this land, but temporary caretakers of something much larger than yourselves." Elena, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally approached them. She was slightly shorter than Maria, with streaks of gray in her dark hair that spoke of wisdom earned through experience. When she reached them, she looked directly at Emma. "You have been planting flowers," she observed. "The earth here has been hungry for gentle care." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "We planted tulips and daffodils for spring, and Daddy says we're going to have the biggest garden in the county next year." "Gardens are good," Elena said simply. "They feed both the body and the spirit of the land." Marcus found himself relaxing despite the surreal nature of the situation. These women didn't feel dangerous or otherworldly. They felt like neighbors with a deeper connection to the area than he had initially understood. "Is there something specific you need from us?" he asked. "Some way we can show our respect for the history of this place?" Maria and Elena exchanged a look that held volumes of unspoken communication. Finally, Maria nodded as if they had reached some internal agreement. "There are burial places on this land that have been forgotten. Small sites where our people laid their ancestors to rest generations ago. The markers have been lost to time, but we remember where they are. We ask only that these places be left undisturbed." "Of course," Marcus said immediately. "Just show us where they are, and we'll make sure to protect them." "And there is more," Elena added quietly. "There are plants that grow wild here, medicines, and foods that our people have cultivated for generations. We asked permission to continue gathering them, as our grandmothers did. Marcus felt a sense of relief wash over him. These were reasonable requests from people with legitimate connections to the land. Absolutely. You're welcome to gather what you need. This is your ancestral home. We're just temporary residents. Emma tugged on her father's shirt. Daddy, can they teach me about the plants? I want to learn about medicines and things. Maria smiled again, and Marcus caught a glimpse of what she might have been like with children of her own. If your father permits it, we would be honored to share our knowledge with you, little flower. I think that would be wonderful, Marcus said, surprised by how naturally the arrangement seemed to fit. Emma loves learning about nature, and I have to admit, I don't know much about the plants that grow around here. Then, we will return tomorrow, when the sun is high, Maria said. We will show you the sacred places and begin teaching the child about the gifts the earth offers to those who know how to see them. As the two women prepared to leave, Elena turned back to Marcus with a serious expression. The other families who lived here, they feared us because they thought we meant harm. They tried to drive us away with threats and anger. But you, she paused, studying his face, you listen. You show respect. This is why the land called you here. The land called us. Everything happens for a reason, Maria said simply. Your daughter has lost her mother. Our people have lost their children. Perhaps we were all meant to find each other. With that cryptic statement, both women turned and walked toward the woods with the same silent grace they had demonstrated throughout their visit. Marcus and Emma watched until they disappeared among the trees, leaving father and daughter standing in their yard with a completely new understanding of their new home. They seem nice, Emma said as they walked back toward the house. And I really want to learn about plant medicines. Marcus ruffled her hair, still processing everything that had just occurred. I think they are nice too, sweetheart. And I think we're going to learn a lot of things we never expected when we moved here. That evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Emma asked the question that had been forming in Marcus's own mind. Daddy, do you think Mommy somehow knew about Maria and Elena when she used to talk about us finding the perfect place to live? Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sarah had always believed in signs and connections that went beyond what the eye could see. I don't know, Princess, but I think she would be very happy to know we've found people who can teach us about our new home. As darkness settled over their land, Marcus realized that for the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like they weren't facing the future alone. True to their word, Maria and Elena returned the following afternoon when the sun stood high overhead, casting short shadows across the farmyard. Emma had been watching for them since breakfast, perched on the front steps with a notebook she had declared would be for recording everything she learned about plant medicines and sacred places. Marcus was replacing a broken window when he heard Emma's excited voice calling out, "They're here, Daddy. They're here." He set down his tools and joined his daughter in the yard, where the two Apache women waited with the same patient stillness they had displayed the day before. Today, however, they carried woven baskets and what appeared to be small ceremonial items wrapped in soft cloth. "Good afternoon," Marcus called out as he approached them. "Emma's been looking forward to this all day." Maria smiled at the young girl's obvious enthusiasm. Learning is a sacred act. The earth shares her secrets only with those who approach with respect and eagerness to understand. "Where do we start?" Emma asked, practically bouncing on her toes. Elena gestured toward the eastern edge of the property, where the woods began. "First, we show you the resting places of our ancestors. You must know where they sleep so you can honor them properly." As they walked across the property, Elena began to speak in a low, reverent tone. "Our people believe that the earth holds the memory of all who have lived upon it. When someone dies, their spirit remains connected to the places that were important to them in life." They stopped at what appeared to be an unremarkable patch of ground near the creek. To Marcus's untrained eye, it looked like any other spot in the woods, perhaps slightly more level than the surrounding area, with a few large stones arranged in what might have been a random pattern. "Here rests my great-great-grandmother, Speaking Wind," Maria said, kneeling beside the stones. She was a healer and a keeper of plant knowledge. She died in the winter of 1847, protecting the medicine plant from soldiers who wanted to burn everything our people held sacred. Emma approached the area with instinctive reverence, speaking in a whisper. "Should we bring her flowers?" "Wild flowers would be appropriate," Elena replied approvingly. "But never pick them from the sacred ground itself. Gather them from other places and bring them as gifts." They visited 2 more burial sites, each marked by subtle signs that Marcus was beginning to recognize: the arrangement of stones, the way certain trees grew in protective circles, the presence of specific plants that seemed to thrive in those locations. At each site, Maria or Elena shared the story of the person who rested there, weaving tales of courage, wisdom, and connection to the land that made the history feel immediate and personal. "Now," Elena said as they finished their circuit of the burial grounds, "we teach you about the gifts the earth provides to those who know how to see them." What followed was the most fascinating afternoon of learning Marcus could remember since his own childhood. The 2 women moved through the woods and fields around his property like they were reading a book, pointing out plants and explaining their uses with the kind of detailed knowledge that could only come from generations of accumulated wisdom. "This is willow bark," Maria explained, showing Emma how to identify the distinctive tree. "When prepared properly, it helps with pain and fever. But you must never take too much from one tree, and you must always ask the tree's permission before harvesting." "Ask the tree's permission?" Emma repeated, fascinated. "All living things have spirits," Elena clarified. "When you take something from nature, you should always give something back: gratitude, a song, an offering of water during dry times. This keeps the balance." They found wild mint growing near the creek, elderberries that could be made into syrup for winter colds, and a dozen other plants that Marcus had walked past every day without recognizing their value. Elena showed Emma how to harvest respectfully, taking only what was needed and leaving the root systems intact so the plants could continue to grow. "Your land is rich with medicine," Maria observed as they filled their baskets. "It has been waiting for someone who would appreciate its gifts rather than simply taking everything without thought." As the afternoon progressed, Marcus found himself drawn into conversations about sustainable farming, traditional ecological knowledge, and the Apache way of understanding the relationship between humans and the natural world. The more he learned, the more he realized how much wisdom had been lost when the original inhabitants of the land had been driven away. "The families who lived here before," he said during a break in their plant gathering, "they didn't understand any of this, did they? Fear makes people blind to beauty," Elena said sadly. "They saw only trespassers instead of neighbors. They heard only strange sounds instead of ancestor voices. They felt only fear instead of wonder. But why didn't anyone try to explain, to teach them?" "We tried," Maria replied. "With the first family, the Williams, we approached as we approached you. But they called the sheriff, demanded that we be arrested for trespassing. The conflict grew worse from there." "What about the other families?" "The Mackenzies shot at us when we tried to gather medicines. They built fences around the burial sites and planted crops over them." Maria's voice held old pain, but no anger. "The Clearwaters were kinder, but they were always afraid. They would watch us from their windows, but never come outside when we were near." Emma looked up from the wild strawberry plants she was examining. "That's so sad. You could have been friends." "Perhaps," Elena said gently. "But some people are not ready to hear what the earth wants to tell them. They live in their heads instead of their hearts." As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the 4 of them made their way back to the farmhouse. Marcus felt like he had learned more about his property in one afternoon than in all the weeks since they had moved there. "There's one more thing we must show you," Maria said as they approached the house. "Something that will help you understand why this land called to you." She led them to the old well that Emma had discovered on their first day. In the fading light, Marcus could see that the stone walls were covered with symbols he hadn't noticed before, carved marks that looked like they might be very old. "This was not built by white settlers," Elena explained. "Our people dug this well generations ago. These markings tell the story of Speaking Wind and her sister, who made their final stand here to protect the sacred sites. Emma traced one of the symbols with her finger. What do they mean? This one represents healing, Maria said, pointing to a carved image that looked like intertwined vines. This one is for protection. And this one, she indicated a symbol that resembled a tree with deep roots. This means home for all who respect the earth. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. Home for all who respect the earth, he repeated. Is that why we were drawn to this place? The land chooses its caretakers, Elena said simply. It called to you because it sensed that you and your daughter have hearts that can learn to listen. As darkness settled over the farmyard, Maria and Elena prepared to leave, but before they disappeared into the woods, Elena turned back to Emma with a serious expression. Tomorrow is Saturday. If your father agrees, we would like to teach you how to prepare some of the medicines we gathered today. And we would like to show you how to sing the songs that help plants grow strong and healthy. Can we, Daddy? Emma asked eagerly. Please. Marcus looked at his daughter's bright, excited face and realized that something fundamental had changed in their lives. They were no longer just a grieving father and daughter trying to start over in a new place. They were becoming part of something larger, a community that stretched across cultures and generations, connected by respect for the land and for each other. I think that would be wonderful, he said. But I have one request. What is that? Maria asked. I'd like to learn too, if you'll have me. I want to understand this place the way you do. Both women smiled, and for the first time since they had appeared, Marcus saw them as they truly were, not mysterious figures from another world, but neighbors who had been waiting years for someone willing to bridge the gap between different ways of understanding what it means to call a place home. The healing knowledge belongs to all who will use it with wisdom and respect, Elena said. You and your daughter are both welcome to learn. As the two women disappeared into the darkness, Emma slipped her small hand into her father's. Daddy, I think this is the best house we've ever lived in. Marcus squeezed her hand gently, looking up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the clear country sky. I think you're right, Princess. I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be. That night, as he tucked Emma into bed, she asked the question that had been on his mind as well. Do you think Maria and Elena are lonely? They don't seem to have families of their own. I don't know, sweetheart, but maybe they do now. 6 months later, as spring painted the farmland in shades of green and gold, Marcus stood in his thriving garden watching Emma demonstrate proper harvesting techniques to a group of children from town. What had begun as a simple friendship with two Apache women had blossomed into something neither he nor Emma could have imagined during those first uncertain weeks on the abandoned farm. The transformation had been gradual but profound. Word had spread through the community about the Thompson farm, where traditional Native American plant wisdom was being shared alongside conventional gardening techniques. At first, only a few curious neighbors had asked to visit, drawn by stories of Emma's remarkable knowledge of medicinal plants and her father's successful organic farming methods. Dr. Patricia Williams, the town's physician, had been among the first to seek out Maria's guidance when conventional treatment had failed to help her elderly mother's chronic arthritis. The willow bark tea and topical preparations Maria had taught her to make had provided relief that prescription medications had not. Word of the success had traveled quickly through a small community where good news was always welcome. Now, every Saturday morning found the Thompson farm bustling with activity as Maria and Elena conducted informal classes for anyone interested in learning traditional ecological knowledge. Children Emma's age sat alongside retired farmers and young parents, all equally eager to understand the relationships between plants, health, and sustainable living. Remember, we never take more than 1 in 4 plants. Emma instructed her young audience as she knelt beside a patch of wild nettle. And we always leave the biggest, strongest ones to make seeds for next year. Marcus watched with pride as his daughter, now 9 years old and confident in her knowledge, guided children who had initially been skeptical of the weird girl who talked to Apache ghosts. Emma had not only learned Maria and Elena's teachings, but had also developed her own gift for making complex concepts accessible to other children. She is a natural teacher, Elena observed, appearing at Marcus's elbow with her characteristic silent grace. Even after months of friendship, the two women still moved with a quietness that sometimes startled him. She gets that from her mother, Marcus replied, feeling the familiar ache that Sarah's memories still brought, though it was now tempered with gratitude for the time they had shared. Sarah always said Emma had an old soul. Speaking Wind would have been proud to know her, Maria added, joining them in watching Emma's impromptu lesson. The ancestors sent you to this land, but perhaps they also sent the land to you. The success of their informal education program had led to developments none of them had anticipated. The county extension office had approached Marcus about formalizing some of the traditional farming techniques Maria and Elena had taught him. His organic produce, grown using centuries-old Apache methods combined with modern sustainable practices, had proven to be more resistant to pests and disease than conventionally farmed crops in the area. "I have news," Marcus announced to his two friends as Emma's class ended, and the visiting families began to pack up their harvested plants and newly made medicines. "The university extension program wants to document our methods. They're talking about creating a formal partnership between traditional knowledge and modern sustainable agriculture." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Will they give credit where credit is due?" "That was my first question," Marcus assured her. "They've agreed that any publications or programs will clearly acknowledge the Apache origins of the techniques and list you and Maria as co-developers of the curriculum." The arrangement had come about through Marcus's careful advocacy and the growing respect the academic community was developing for indigenous knowledge systems. It represented a significant step toward the kind of cultural recognition and validation that had been denied to Native communities for generations. But perhaps more important than any formal recognition was the transformation that had occurred within their small rural community. The initial suspicion and fear that had driven away previous families had been replaced by curiosity and respect. People who had once whispered about the haunted Thompson farm now spoke proudly of their local experts in traditional healing and sustainable farming. Old Pete from the hardware store had become one of their most enthusiastic supporters, frequently sending customers to the farm when they had questions about organic pest control or natural remedies for common ailments. The Johnson family, their elderly neighbors, had started a friendship garden using Maria's companion planting techniques, and their vegetables had never been more productive. Even Bill Crawford, who had originally warned Marcus about the property's history, had become a regular visitor after his arthritic hands had found relief through Elena's herbal preparations. His son Jake, initially skeptical of anything involving ancient remedies, was now apprenticing with Marcus to learn the traditional farming methods that were producing remarkable yields. "There's something else," Marcus continued, pulling a letter from his pocket. "I got a call yesterday from a documentary filmmaker. Someone from the university told her about our program, and she wants to make a film about the integration of traditional and modern farming practices." "What kind of film?" Maria asked cautiously. "The kind that tells the real story," Marcus assured her. "She specializes in documenting indigenous knowledge systems and their applications in contemporary environmental challenges. She wants to focus on how traditional wisdom can help address modern problems like climate change and soil depletion." Emma bounded over to join their conversation, her cheeks flushed with excitement from teaching. "Are we going to be on television?" "Maybe," Marcus laughed, ruffling her hair. "But more importantly, we're going to help other people learn what Maria and Elena have taught us." "Can we tell them about the burial sites too?" Emma asked, "about how important it is to respect the places where ancestors sleep?" The protection and honoring of the burial sites had become one of the most significant aspects of their stewardship of the land. Under Maria's guidance, Marcus had created discrete memorial markers and had established the areas as permanent conservation zones. The county had even updated its records to reflect the historical significance of the sites, ensuring they would be protected for future generations. "We'll tell them everything that needs to be told," Elena said softly. "Stories have power." When they are told with respect and truth, they can heal old wounds and build new bridges. As evening approached and the last of their Saturday visitors departed, the four of them gathered on the front porch of the farmhouse that Marcus had completely restored over the past months. The building now stood straight and strong, its windows clear and bright, its gardens flourishing under the care of people who understood the relationship between human needs and environmental health. Emma curled up in her favorite chair, a photo of her mother in her lap, one of the few possessions they had brought from their old life. Sarah's image smiled out at them from the picture, and Marcus felt her presence in the love that surrounded their unusual family. "Do you think my mom would like Maria and Elena?" Emma asked, a question she had posed several times over the months as her bond with the two women had deepened. "I think she would love them," Marcus replied honestly. "Your mother always believed that the most important lessons came from the heart, not from books. And I think she would be amazed at the beautiful, wise young woman you're becoming." Maria reached over and gently touched Emma's hand. "Your mother's spirit is woven into this place now, little flower. When you sing to the plants and they grow strong, when you heal someone with medicines from the earth, when you teach other children to respect the land, your mother's love is part of all of it." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a desperate search for an affordable home had evolved into something he could never have imagined, a life rich with purpose, community, and connection to something larger than himself. The farm that had once been considered cursed had become a place of healing and learning. The land that had driven away family after family had found caretakers who understood that ownership meant stewardship, and that home meant honoring all who had lived there before. "What happens next?" Emma asked as Elena began gathering her things for the walk back to the reservation, where both women had established their own sustainable farming demonstration project. "Next, we keep learning," Maria replied. "We keep teaching. We keep showing others that there are many ways to live in harmony with the earth, and all of them require respect, patience, and love. And we keep being a family," Elena added, looking around at their little circle with obvious affection. "The kind of family that grows not from blood alone, but from choosing to care for each other and for the places we call home." As Marcus tucked Emma into bed that night, she made an observation that captured the essence of their transformation. "Daddy, remember when we first came here, and you said sometimes the best treasures are hidden in places that don't look special at first?" "I remember. I think we were the treasure this place was looking for. We just didn't know it yet." Marcus kissed his daughter goodnight, marveling at the wisdom that had grown in her like the plants in their garden. Slowly, naturally, nurtured by love and attention and the kind of teaching that came from the heart. Outside their restored farmhouse, the land stretched peaceful and productive under a sky full of stars. In the woods, the burial sites rested under careful protection, honored and remembered. In the gardens, plants grew strong under the influence of both traditional wisdom and modern technique. And in the house itself, a family slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that they had found their place in the world and that their place had found them. The two Apache women who had once been seen as mysterious trespassers were now beloved teachers and adopted family. The cursed land had become a model of sustainable agriculture and cultural cooperation. And a grieving father and daughter who had thought they were simply looking for a fresh start had discovered that they were part of a larger story of healing, respect, and the enduring power of people from different worlds choosing to build bridges instead of walls. As morning would soon show, the story was far from over. There would be more children to teach, more families to welcome, more traditional knowledge to document and preserve. But the foundation had been laid, in the soil they had learned to tend, in the relationships they had learned to honor, and in the understanding that the earth's greatest treasures are revealed only to those who approach them with open hearts and willing hands.